Hello, and welcome again to JRPG. I'm Jay, and today's video is a list video. We probably won't have many of these, though this one is very dear to me because it is about my favorite childhood video game company, Sega. I've compiled a list of facts over time that I never knew, and since I grew up with Sega and never knew any of these, I imagine there might be some of you out there that may not know these too. These facts are in no particular order except to be relative, literary flow, and also they're kind of in sequential order. So none are more shocking or important than the others. To me, they're all interesting and obscure facts. If you'd like my sources, if there are enough people asking, I'll put them in the comments below, but basically everything here can be found on Wikipedia. I cross-referenced facts that I had never heard before on other sites on Wikipedia just to verify them. I didn't know these when I first heard them though. Maybe you did, but then again, I don't read everything on Wikipedia. Anyway, stay tuned and see how many of these little known Sega facts you know.
Sega stands for Service Games. It was initially founded as Standard Games, but after coin-operated slot machines were outlawed in the US, Martin Bromley took his business to Japan, where he met David Rosen, and the two merged their competing companies to form the Sega we know today. Standard Games was initially founded in Honolulu, Hawaii in 1940. Sega made games for the Atari before the video game crash of 1983. And then focused on arcades before coming out with their first console, the SG-1000.
I actually picked this game up from a local antique store, and really I only got it because I thought it was rather strange. An Atari 400 game that had Sega's logo on it. Not to mention it was a Star Trek game. It seems like worlds collided with this one game. The same antique mall is where I got the aforementioned Atari. So how does this game play? It's actually quite good, and detailed for its time. I found myself playing it longer than most games I had picked up in that haul. I rather enjoyed it. I recommend it.
Sega sold their distribution rights for the Master System in the US to Tonka, the company most famous for the toy trucks. Sega made Sega cards for the Master System. They were made by Mitsubishi Plastics, yes, the car company, and were similar to Hue cards for the TurboGrafx-16. If you are unfamiliar with these, both the Master System and the TurboGrafx use cards to store their games instead of cartridges. This allowed more memory capacity for the games. In Brazil, there are several variations of the Master System, including the Sega Master System 3, which functioned wireless via an RF transmitter, and the Master System Girl. Brazil is still selling the Sega Master System to this day, although it looks a little different than way back when. For instance, it no longer has a cartridge slot. Before Leapfrog was even a thought, Sega released an educational video game console called the Sega Pico in the early 90s. It used a storybook and a pen that would allow children to interact with the characters on the screen. Disney and Sonic were among these big licensed characters that were used on the system.
I personally remember when these were on store shelves. I remember a holiday season because I was in a winter jacket. I went down to the video game aisle of Toys R Us, where they had boxes of all their products and plastic pockets that lined the walls with paper slips in them that you would take out, and these paper slips had the name of whatever you were buying and the price in big numbers. And you would take these paper slips to customer service or to a register, and then they would make sure that you get your item at the checkout. Also, down these aisles though, there were TVs, and they had systems that you could demo, and I remember playing the Sega Pico there. I believe I was playing a Disney game, Lion King or something like that, it may have been Sonic.
Sega has a current educational video game console out exclusively in Japan currently, and that is a spin-off of the Sega Pico called the Sega Advanced Pico Bina. In the early 90s, Sega gave the right to Sonic the Hedgehog to Archie Comics to make a comic book based on Sonic the Hedgehog series, and in 2008 it was awarded the Guinness Book of World Record for the longest running comic strip based on a video game. In September 2015, it also surpassed Marvel's Conan the Barbarian comic to become the longest running comic book based on a franchise. Archie Comics recently started making Mega Man comics with the rights acquired from Capcom, and the two have crossed over many times.
I remember going to the store because I wasn't allowed to have a subscription, nor did I have the money to pay for it at the time, being very little, and always seeing Sonic comics and picking them up whenever I could. I wish I could have started reading these from the beginning, but I always enjoyed these comics, and I could never get enough of Sonic the Hedgehog as a kid. Besides, the artwork was really cool. It seemed what Sonic was about. It was an edgy art style. I mean, Sonic looks kind of more modern down there, so it kind of captured the attitude of the 90s.
Dreamcast was one of the first consoles to ever use a mouse and keyboard, which bridged the gap between PC and console gamers a bit, and allowed PC controls on some games to allow PC gamers to transition to the Dreamcast easier than they were if they were to transition to other systems. The Dreamcast had an internet browser and online play before any other system out there. The Dreamcast was basically the Steam machine of the late 90s. The Dreamcast was the only major console in the past 20 years to not feature any games made by EA. The Dreamcast had numerous models made, most made in very few supply, and for the most part exclusive only to Japan. These featured the Divers 2000 CX-1, which had a quote-unquote Sonic-shaped Dreamcast integrated TV and was compatible for TV conferences. There was a Hello Kitty special edition, special editions for the game Seaman, and also for Resident Evil Code Veronica. Even Toyota, yes, the car company, had their own variation. There was also a black edition labeled the Sports Edition. If you think Nintendo's Wii is the first console to use motion controls, think again. Sega is credited with the earliest use of motion controls in a video game. Their arcade boxing game, Heavyweight Champ, from 1976, first used motion as a form of control. The Sega Genesis also had a peripheral that detected body movement as a use of control, predating Microsoft's Kinect. The first actual motion controller, however, was the Dreamcast's fishing rod peripheral. Sega owns the video game studio Atlas, as well as the studio Creative Assembly, the studio that is scheduled to work on Halo Wars 2. So essentially, Sega is working on a game about Halo. Sega also owns Relic Entertainment, who worked on the Dawn of War and Company of Heroes series. Sister Sonic was the first RPG conceived to use Sonic the Hedgehog characters, but it would have used said characters in place of characters based in the game Popful Mail. This move seems similar to how Mario characters were used in Super Mario Bros. 2 in place of characters from the game Doki Doki Panic. This game was set to release in 1995. It would also featured Sonic's long-lost sister, but due to negative feedback, the game was never made. There were groups of people who organized to write letters to protest this game being made. Definitely a sign of the times. But at least it was a good example of how people can shape the video game market. There wouldn't be another attempt at making another Sonic RPG until BioWare's successful 2008 game. Did you know that Sega created a portable media player in October 2008? It was able to play various media like music and movies. You could look at pictures and read ebooks. It also had radio and television capabilities and a digital camera and voice recorder built in. This device, known as the Sega Vision, was also planned to have mobile game functionality, but it was removed. As of 2009, the device is only available through Sega UFO catchers, the claw vending machines. At some point in time they may be available online Sega also has plans to release new ones in the future. But this was not the first entry of the Sega Vision. The Sega Vision was initially started out in 1977.
Now, look right over there at those doors. Open those doors and show her the prize. It's a projection TV. Television comes to life on Sega of America's 50-inch diagonal screen and gives sports, movies, and variety shows the big picture from Sega of America.
This is an ordinary television set. This is Sega Vision, a whole new ball game in home entertainment. The difference? Just switch on Sega Vision and presto, you're closing in with me as the giant 50-inch color screen covers all the action. Sega Vision, for really full coverage. It's nothing like any television you've ever seen before. See it for yourself.
At Sega Vision Studios, Fox Hills Mall, Del Amo Fashion Square, Carson Mall, and Woodland Hills Promenade.
What made it different than the products at the time was that Sega had only made coin-operated amusements like phone booths, UFO catchers, and pinball and slot machines, but they had not made a television. This TV couldn't play games, but it did bear the Sega name. It was at this time, when Sega was drawing up the sketches to plan this television, that also Sony was looking into making a projection television as well, to be sold in spring of 1977. This could have possibly been the first Sega-Sony war before the Saturn and the PS1 first battled it out. While there's not much information for this entry, it is rather interesting that this could have been the first time that Sega and Sony have gone against each other, and it just makes it another interesting fact in Sega's unique history.
So what did you guys think? How many of these facts did you know? Did you know all of them? Did you learn anything from this video? Tell us which ones you knew in the comments below, and let us know if there are any other obscure Sega facts I might have missed. Since the holidays are coming up, I hope you have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, or what other holiday you may celebrate this winter. I wish you the best. Thanks for watching, and see you next video.